Hi there, my name is Katie Novak, and this is my Media Clip final project for educating exceptional students. I'm going to be discussing to you today the various disabilities and disorders that we have learned about over the course of the semester, and I'm going to be gearing it towards second grade. Personally, I have really enjoyed learning about all these different ways that students with disabilities and these disorders have been integrated into the classroom and, in a sense, being taken care of more sensibly over the past several decades. So my first disability we're going to be learning about, or I'm going to be speaking about, is learning disabilities. This is a disability that I like to think about as being more below the surface. It's not something that you can typically visually see to the naked eye. So students in my classroom around second grade are probably going to struggle the most with dyslexia. They're going to have trouble with reading, having the letters being switched around, trouble with math, the numbers being kind of manipulated wrongly on assignments relating to that. Students with learning disability may struggle with memory impairments, which can be kind of detrimental to students who are learning all these new concepts, and also social and emotional needs may be recognized more so with this disability. Some accommodations in my classroom would be allowing students to work at their own pace, and by this I mean if I give a math assignment with 20 different multiplication problems or addition problems, probably more addition, letting these students with learning disabilities only do the odds or even problems, things like that, or just letting them do as many as they can in the time allotted. If there's a test, maybe giving them extra time for that test, creating 2 different spelling tests, making a more kind of advanced one and a more not so advanced spelling test, just kind of accommodate for that, and then also allowing for more group discussions, allowing students to verbalize more so in the classroom, which I think will be beneficial to the classroom as a whole. Next is the communication disorder. This is a disorder where students have troubles with retaining information, being able to grasp and understand different concepts, which can in turn lead to difficulty in pronouncing sounds, articulating words. If they can't retain that information in their brains and their minds, they might have more trouble verbalizing that information out. Stuttering might be pretty common. And with receiving information and understanding it, that complication, it can lead to not allowing students to formulate their own ideas and information on their own at the pace that their peers are doing. Some physical ailments with this disorder include cleft palate or lip. I think that if a student had this in my classroom and I felt it necessary, I would incorporate a speech-language pathologist. I think him or her could help me as a teacher as well to grow in their learning, include the students in the classroom. I think students who are younger can really build off of their peers. If they're struggling with articulating the R sound, hearing that from a peer might help them. Also using multiple methods when teaching, not just visually, not just listening, but more hands-on activities, more graphics, more visual things so that the student can learn a different way as well. Emotional and behavioral disorders. These can be seen either externally or internally in students. Externally, these students are aggressive, they're disruptive, they're talking, they are just kind of trying to seek attention in a sense. They're bullying other students. Internally, these students might be anxious, might be fearful, worrisome. I think that a lot of times people don't really associate younger students with these internal emotional and behavioral disorders, but I believe that students of this age, they're starting to become more anxious when it comes to their spelling test. They're more fearful of not being able to finish their rocket math at the same speed that their peers. These students might not comply with what I want them to do in the classroom. They also might confide in me with suicidal thoughts. And because of both the external and internally driven emotions and behaviors, they kind of can struggle to make friends. Some accommodations that I would make in my classroom is not forcing these students to have group projects or the class as a whole. Offering who wants to work by themselves, who wants to work with a classmate, who wants to work with a group, allowing them to do that. One cool thing that I found in the textbook about self-regulation was incorporating technology. These students are always on their technology, like at home, outside of the classroom, so why not incorporate that and allow that technology to help them self-regulate, monitor the progress, see how they're doing in the classroom. And then I think this just kind of broadens the whole idea for second graders, make my instructions clear and concise, not leaving room for question, but being willing to answer questions if they arise. ADHD. So for ADHD students with ADHD, my apologies, there are 3 subtypes. There's predominantly inattentive. These are the students who struggle with really focusing on details, can't really keep on track. They're easily distracted. They can be predominantly hyper-impulsive, where they can't remain in their seat. They're super fidgety. They can't keep their hands to themselves, things like that. Or they can be a combination of both struggling to stay on task and struggling to stay in their seat, kind of a mixture. That's the most common type. Students with ADHD also may struggle with regulating their emotions, whether it be positive or negative. Some accommodations that I'd make in my classroom would be flexible seating. If a child is fidgety sitting in a seat, maybe incorporating a rocking chair or one of those yoga balls that they can sit on, making more kinesthetic, lead-driven assignments, more hands-on activities, brain breaks, adjusting lighting and audio, turning down the sound, turning it up, closing a door so that there's no distractions out in the hallway, closing a window so that they can't see or hear the cars moving by, and then just helping them reach attainable goals and also helping them with organization to maybe help them stay on task a little bit better. The next disability is intellectual disability. This is another disability that can typically just be a below the surface, not a physical type of ailment. Students with intellectual disabilities struggle with their memory, whether it be short-term memory, long-term memory, or their working memory, being able to do daily tasks. A physical thing that people typically associate students with intellectual disabilities, it can be Down syndrome. They can be a child with Down syndrome. There's limitations in their adaptive behavior, which adaptive behavior is basically what enables someone to coexist in their environment with a great amount of success and at least amount of conflict between people. So that adaptive behavior may be limited. It can be severe. Just kind of doing daily tasks can be difficult. Some accommodations would be, extending time for worksheets or tests for a child, verbalizing information. If they struggle with that pen to paper, giving them the opportunity to verbalize their test answer to a scribe or to me as the teacher. And also, that could probably be beneficial for the whole class, having a group discussion assignment. And again, making information clear and concise, letting students answer questions, encourage them to ask questions if they don't know what's going on exactly. Autism is on the autism spectrum disorder. This child with autism is going to struggle with social emotional hypocrisy, which basically means taking an initiative in social interactions, having conversations with other students. They're going to struggle displaying nonverbal communication. These 2 things can lead into struggling to maintain relationships. If the student can't form conversations or initiate conversations, they're going to probably struggle with having friends. They can be really repetitive. They tend to really focus on one thing that they like. Say a student in my classroom really likes cars. They're going to focus on cars. They're not going to care what I'm talking about up front usually. They're just going to want to hear about cars. That fixed interest is going to be present. Excessive touching and smelling can also be present with a student with autism. And accommodations just kind of goes in with their fixed interest, like incorporating their interest into my lesson. If I'm having a problem in math, 5 plus 5, if someone has 5 cars and this person has 5 cars, how many cars do they have total? Making that accommodation so that they can focus. They're like, oh my goodness, cars, so excited. Flexible seating, allowing them to modify their own learning. I love this. There was an example in our textbook about how a student really liked learning under their desk. They just felt comfortable under their desk. They felt safe there. Allowing the student to help modify their own learning. And just for me to be able to watch them and see what works best for them. Sensory tools would be great. A sensory bin with different things, a fidget spinner that they can have in their desk with them to mess around with if they need that. Brain breaks, give them extra brain breaks. And then also create a routine that can be followed daily. At this time we're going to go to the bathroom. At this time we're going to lunch. At this time we're going to recess, and keeping that routine for them. Traumatic brain injuries are the next disability that we're going to talk about. So TBIs can range from mild, moderate to severe. Mild is the most common, as concussions fall under this category. There can be physical changes in the student with a TBI, weakness, fatigue, coordination problems, maybe like balance, things like that. lowered IQ, so they're going to struggle with school a little bit more than their peers. Memory impairments, again, is going to come into play. And then they also struggle with paying attention for long periods of time. And so some accommodations for this student, if they are struggling to pay attention, giving instructional pacing, giving them a chunk of information. Okay, let's talk about it. What do you guys think about this? Adding some more. Okay, what do you guys think about this? Breaking it up. There was an example in our textbook about a student who they would let them go lay on the couch that's in the classroom. They would still be listening, but they would be in their safe space where they feel comfortable to learn. Giving them downtime, giving the students adequate processing time, which can be beneficial for the whole classroom. Second graders might need a little bit more time to understand, or repeating that information till they understand. And then again, monitoring when they understand, how they understand this information. Hearing loss, kind of pretty self-explanatory. This is a student who's going to kind of struggle with listening because they can't really hear very well. Because of that, they're going to struggle with the verbal directions because again, they are struggling to hear. Hearing loss can range from, partial hearing loss to complete deafness. These students are going to have trouble with articulating their sounds because they're not going to necessarily hear as well as a student without this disability. Possible speech delay, like I said, you may be able to hear a little bit, might not be able to hear at all. Some accommodations for this is that if there is a video on screen, including closed captioning, verbalizing information, being able to look at my students, letting them be able to see my mouth moving. Establish predictable routines, like with autism, creating a routine where they know what's going to happen that day for the most part. Eliminating background noise would be a really good thing, closing windows so that they can't hear that car, that background noise. If they can partially hear, trying to eliminate all that white noise, that white sound in the background. And also if the student uses sign language, teaching my class how to use sign language as well, even if it's just like, hi, like, how are you? Just simple social cues. Visual impairments, these are students who, they may be able to see a little bit or completely blind. These students might be more reserved in new environments, such as if we go on a field trip, they might be a little more hesitant in that new environment because they aren't sure, where is a tripping hazard, where is the door. It's going to be difficult for them to get around. Poor hand-eye coordination because their vision is not completely there. They also might be a little bit clumsy because that visual impairment is present. Some accommodations is modifying test time. If they need someone to be a proctor, if you need them to leave the room, just extend their test time in some way. If you have a visual, like on a projector screen, blow it up so they can see it better. Set them at maybe the front of the classroom so they can see better. Limit the use of worksheets. Probably want to try to stray away from those as much as possible. Adapted material. These are like large print maps, include braille, flashcards, something that they can see maybe up close. Maybe do activities with a magnifying glass. Hands-on activities, and also teaching students how to self-advocate for themselves, encourage them to ask questions if they can't see something, if they have a question, just giving them that. Assistive technology is also something that can be incorporated into the classroom. Braille devices, auditory devices that can assist them, just different things maybe that can help them better their learning. And then finally, the gifted and talented. These are students who are performing academically, whether it be academics, leadership roles, different things at a higher level than their peers. High intellect, they're just leadership born. They're very good at leadership. Artists, very artistic, very visually inclined. They can tend to be a perfectionist, highly competitive. They are just kind of performing a little bit better than their peers, or a lot better, depends. Some accommodations for gifted and talented students is a curriculum extension. This just means that, if you have a worksheet for your class, maybe having an extra worksheet ready for this student. So if they finish a lot quicker, being able to give that next worksheet to them. Cognitive taxonomies. This is basically helping them work on their cognitive skills to help advance their academic skills as well. Measuring the students' progress as they're going, kind of seeing how they're doing. Do they need more harder content? This can also extend into exploring the option of putting the student maybe in a third grade classroom or a fourth grade classroom, giving them that option to further their learning in the classroom that may be at their educational standard. And so these are the 10 different disabilities that we have learned over this semester. I believe that I have learned a lot and I'm so excited to implement what I have learned into my future classroom.